Hello, friends. On today's episode of The Red Room, we'll be talking about how anger can affect one's identity and vice versa, and how both of those things can affect interpersonal relationships. Today I've got a special guest, and it's my friend who's chosen to remain anonymous, but we'll assign them the name Comet for today. Now, Comet and I had a pretty lengthy, about 45-minute conversation, sort of podcast style over Discord, where we talked about today's topic and how it's applicable, specifically in our group of friends. See, Comet is a member of the group of friends that I've talked about in both the first episode of The Red Room and in past videos on camera with you in general. My core group of friends, the people that I talk to the most and am the most close to. And so Comet and I have been through a lot together over the last 5 or 6 years that we've known each other. And so as a result, I figured that they would be a great person to talk to about some of the topics that we're going to cover today, as well as some that we might use for future episodes. One thing that I definitely wanted to introduce with this episode to The Red Room as a series is the concept of bringing in other people to talk about issues, and that'll become very apparent soon with some of our topics. There are some things that I wanted to cover on this series that I might not be qualified to talk about purely based on my own experiences and myself as a person. So there will be many guests to come, and I hope that you enjoy all of their company. Hello!
Hey!
For now, let's start talking about today's topics. Today, I guess, we're going to be talking about the intersection between anger and feelings of anger, being an angry person, and queerness, and how your identity affects you, and how those things can interact with each other. So one of the first things that Comet and I talked about in our conversation was how anger can be learned from and passed down by your parents, or the other people raising you, your figures in life as a child.
Growing up in a family that having a father that is always angry about something, but doesn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So it just kind of festers with him. So that's pretty much how dealing with anger has always been with me until it finally pops out and I get mad at someone that doesn't need to be.
Now, one of the things that we did also cover while talking about our parents is toxic masculinity, and we didn't say it in those words just by chance, but it's the concept that macho men and, men are very strong, women are very weak and emotional, and that being emotional is weak, and, those kind of standards, and, all of that is very heteronormative and cisnormative and stuff, which are words you're going to hear me say infinite times in this series, because I'm trans and not a guy or straight. So just be like that, I guess.
Yeah, having a father who's constantly angry about small things and a mother who's constantly emotional about things, those things don't
it doesn't line up. Yeah,
for a child.
Yeah.
And having to figure the nice middle ground was me just sitting there being angry without doing anything about it. But I would be emotional about it, but I wouldn't do anything about it.
Comet and I were raised as angry men, or boys, I guess. I would wager to guess that I didn't really mature into a man. I matured into a different person entirely who happened to not identify with a particular gender. But you'll see we cover that in this next clip. I have a lot of history with that, too. I used to be a very angry person as a kid. And, when I was little, up until I was 14, I was just effectively a cis-het white guy. I'm still white, yeah. But everything else has changed.
No, seriously.
But,
I
so, yeah.
Before figuring out myself, it's the same situation of being that angry, straight guy that...
Yeah, and I think that there is an element of, the stereotype of that angry, straight guy that affects how you feel when you're that person, Yeah. I don't know if you share in that, but I was always, my dad's always been kind of like a woke guy. And so my dad was an angry, up until that point in his life, straight, guy. And kind of raised me to be an angry, straight guy in some ways. So I feel like I definitely learned that behavior and became part of that stereotype. And I didn't know what to do to stop that. And it was a really hard journey, I guess, if I want to call it that, to becoming a less angry person. One thing that I thought was really interesting that we both sort of came to at the same time in this conversation was the idea of incidental change versus gradual change in a person. And what that sort of means is some people change their, the errors in their ways, their bad habits, their bad behaviors following an incident. And that could be a near death experience, or the loss of a friend or a loved one, either death or they leave you for better people, or, there's a myriad of ways in which that can happen. But that's incidental change. It's something big happening in your life over a short period of time that makes you think, reflect, and change yourself. Yeah, and I feel that because, like, I think I've told you this story, but I'll tell it, for the audience. I had that period of time where I was angry like my whole goddamn life all the time, pretty much, until I was in junior high, middle school. And I did a science project in a group with some of my friends for my class, and it was supposed to be like a marble rolling down a track. Very low stakes. All of the grading for it was extra credit. It was like, hey, show up and make this, and if you win the contest, then you get extra credit. And I didn't need that extra credit to pass. I had an A in that class, but we built our marble track and it worked. And then the judge came over and I ran the marble down and it didn't work. It stopped and it flew off the track. And the lady was like, oh, well, that's unfortunate. Sorry. And she walks away. And I got so mad that I trampled through our entire structure and I broke it. I just broke it right there in front of everyone. And all of my friends were trying to stop me. They were like, hey, why are you doing that? What the fuck? We could have another chance. She's going to come back. She just told me that she would come back, and now it's broken, and we can't fix it. Because we had spent like 45 minutes making this thing. And after that, all of my friends decided without me that they were not going to talk to me for 2 weeks. Literally zero. And so I only had one friend who wasn't friends with everyone else for 2 weeks. And they were like, if you're not going to stop being angry, we're never going to talk to you again. And so I felt terrible and it was super traumatic for me. But in this particular case, I feel like I kind of needed that. And that was like a point of introspection for me, which was something that I'd never really gotten before in my life. And I feel like I worked really, really hard. Well, not feel like I did. I worked really, really hard to be a less angry person up through like my first couple years of high school. And that's why by the time that I met you, for real, and met all of our friends, I was a much less openly angry person, and I stopped feeling like that inside over the course of several years. Now, incidental change is to be contrasted, as I said, with gradual change. Gradual change would be defined as casually, or I guess not casually, but seriously over longer amounts of time and less incidentally, analyzing yourself and your flaws, taking feedback from others, and becoming the best version of yourself as you go. Taking things as they come and improving yourself, your bad behaviors, your negative thoughts, your things like that over time as you can, and addressing them as you go. I might not have explained that in the best way.
Certain people need to have that moment of absolute realization in the moment.
Yeah.
Of something that happened that made people realize something, and you learn from it.
Yeah. We've had a few of those between us, Yeah.
I think I've had a few of those with everyone.
Yeah.
And it definitely took me a lot longer to realize my anger than certain people would. Like in your instance, it took that one big instance. And for me, it took a good multiple instances.
But it is how it is.
Headstrong I was. Yeah, because of how headstrong I was when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You need to have that instance. It could be multiple.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it could be the course of, a whole lifetime. For people like your dad who are struggling, but now he's recognizing his problems, it takes a long time.
At 46 years old, he's now realizing that there's an anger issue.
Yeah.
you know?
And that's
And
worth checking at any point, checking in on yourself and analyzing your own behavior, whether it's through the lens of other people or just within yourself, is super important. And for a lot of people, it takes an incident to like start doing that in a meaningful way.
figure it out slowly and methodically instead of going, bam, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, because I
Because
also think like media, especially heteronormative, cisnormative media, which is most of it, focuses on change as a montage. And that is like filmmaking, like movies and TV, but it's also like that affects the way that we think. And I think for us as Americans engrossed in American society and media, there's a huge focus on, oh, well, you can change yourself overnight and be redeemed. So, with all of that said, let's get back to the topic. How can anger affect one's identity? How can being raised as an angry person hinder your ability to explore your identity characteristics, your sexuality, your gender? Let's see. And I feel like through that, I started realizing that some of the people I really wanted to be friends with, it's not that I just wanted to be their friend, it's that I had a crush on them, and they were all guys. And I was like, well, shit, I'm a guy, because at the time I was. So what does that make me? So I guess I like worked out, oh, I guess I must be like bisexual or whatever. And that was a super important experience for me, but I would never have been able to get like tangibly close to the people that I used to like realize that if I was still that angry, shitty person full time. You know what I mean?
yeah, I agree with that. And the way my realizing my sexuality was knowing my body type, very skinny and lean and stuff like that. I definitely realized I couldn't be the macho man my dad was, or still is. So realizing that, I'm like, well, I don't want to be that in any capacity, so I think I'll figure something else out. And the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, well, maybe I'm just more feminine. There was a time where I did think I was more feminine than
masculine.
not.
Yeah,
masculine. That's the word for it. And there was definitely a time where I thought I was trans because of how skinny. And I don't think I've ever talked about this.
I've never heard this. No.
there was a very short period of time where I thought I was trans.
So Comet and I have a shared experience, like I said, of growing up as angry men and not really knowing where to go from there once we realized that there's a flaw either in being men or being angry or both.
Figuring out that I was non-binary was definitely a challenge because I was like, well, what the fuck am I? If I don't think I'm male, if I don't think I'm female, then
what is there? Yeah.
What is it? And so figuring out that non-binary exists and is very prominent among a lot of people who were in the same boat as me was very, very helpful and calming.
And so learning to be better and learning to be different over time kind of happen in an intertwined, a weave together way, because figuring out your identity is something that happens most easily in a place of comfort. It's really hard to find that in a place of panic when you're thinking about the rest of your life, or more specifically to our cases, bad things about yourself and your relationships with people, whether that be your parents, your friends, partners, etc. I think it's really important to recognize that figuring out your identity characteristics as an LGBT person is about figuring out how you want to classify or internalize the way that you've already felt, rather than creating a new behavior to discard old ones. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people miss. And obviously, if you happen to do both at the same time, then that's your prerogative. Anybody can be gay, trans, whatever, But if you're using thinking that you're trans or saying that you're gay or something like that as a method of removing yourself from your past behavior, that's just you can't be devoid of accountability. You're still to blame for what you've done, at least in part, and there has to be some sort of taking responsibility included in that. It can't be masked by changing yourself. And a lot of people do that by way of wardrobe or vibe or the music they listen to or the crowd they hang with. But some people do that by feigning being trans or gay, and that's just not cool.
That my parents before still kind of think this. they still think that being trans is a way of getting away from yourself and changing your character. And I have such a hard time trying to explain that that's not the case.
Yeah.
They just 90% of the time they genuinely want to figure themselves out.
Mm-hmm.
And being trans is one of those ways that you can figure yourself out, you know?
Our conversation transitioned from being about the reasons that people should and do figure out their identities as LGBT people to being about some of the bad reasons that people fake that. And I know that we already touched on that a little bit before. I just wanted to give this next clip some context. So enjoy this editor's aside, I guess.
There has to be trust. There has to be conversation.
Exactly.
There has to be caring. There has to be that real trust that you have to regain once you lose it.
Oh yeah. And like building that trust with new people without closing off what you've done with others can also be unhealthy. You know, you don't always have an opportunity for closure, and sometimes it is best for one's health, physically or mentally, to just cut someone off. But if you have an opportunity to patch something up, I say do it any day, you know, because it's better to know that you have solved your problems and grown than to assume that when you might accidentally be repeating those same negative behaviors.
And that hits very close to home, considering what we have been through.
Exactly. I agree.
You know?
All right, we've mentioned something a few times now that we call the group discourse. And depending on how I edit this, you will or won't have heard that mentioned specifically, but it's something that I need to explain to you guys in sort of a Spark Notes kind of way before we move on. Essentially, a long time ago, and by that I mean actually not that long ago, probably a little less than 2 years, a lot of my friends and I in our big group realized that some of the people in our friend group weren't treating us very well, and we handled it in a fairly immature way, to be honest. The recollection that I have, mixed with what I want to say on camera without divulging detail, essentially sums up to a lot of people got mad at each other about a lot of different things. And rather than handling that anger in a productive way by talking things out, some of us decided that we would talk things out at length to each other in an anger-fueled way. And this resulted in us cutting off some of the other people in our group. One of those people, for me, was Comet. And you'll see that we have, you know, we're talking here at length, and we've recorded this just a few days before you'll see this video, depending on how quickly I can edit it. We're friends again now, and Comet is back in our friend group, and, you know, we've patched things up. But it took a long time to be able to do that, or to even feel like I could reach out to them to, you know, approach the idea of doing that. And some of the reasons why that's the case will be evident with this next clip.
And it's it's definitely very nice as everything that has happened between us and our group of friends. Seeing what we've gone through and stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's just, we've learned from it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was shitty in the moment, but we stepped back, and whether it be with a couple of days or a year, as in
your case, you know, our case.
You know, it was over time.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be right then.
Exactly. And, you know, there's a lot of growth that happens from all sides. And I feel like, you know, coming back to what we were talking about, you know, originally, it's like there is, you know, that anger that you and I and other people in our friend group used to have as younger versions of ourselves, or unfinished versions of ourselves is probably an even better way to say it. You know, that anger can still re-manifest itself as a more subtle expression of feelings. And I feel like that the experience that we had with our group disbanding in part and then coming back together more recently, I think that experience helped me realize that that anger can still manifest in my actions, even if I don't make myself sound angry, you know? Mm-hmm. And that it's super important to keep that in check. That incident, if you want to isolate it, was a microcosm of the problems with the old versions of us and the old version of our group of friends. Was that we would let shit just sit, and we would talk shit privately to each other, and we would make things a way bigger deal than they were for the sake of drama. or I don't know what, for the sake of getting out anger that we didn't know how to process.
Yeah.
So now that you know about the group discourse, let's focus on what we learned from it and how we learned from it and the fact that we did learn from it instead of just continuing to be angry at each other. But I do feel bad in retrospect about the fact that like the anger and the frustration in some of us, myself included, bottled up and sort of bubbled into us putting each other down. We found scapegoats to make us feel like we weren't angry unjustly by making it seem justified. I feel like we all talked about what was going down to each other in real time extensively. That's one of the reasons why the Red Room exists for me to be making this video right now, is because everyone came to my house for 12 hours at a time to just vomit out our feelings at each other and to each other over the course of several months, almost a year. And that communication, that growth in communication and how much we felt like we could all talk about to each other happened all at once. And the catalyst for it was scapegoating for things that they didn't do or that weren't that big of a deal. So this nears the end of our conversation here. It's, there's a couple more things that I'd like for you guys to see, but this was the gist of what we were talking about. I think that it's very interesting to contrast anger and identity as completely separate, but not so separate things for some people, myself and Comet included. I think that this conversation was really interesting, and I hope that you guys have been enjoying it too. But before we close out with this last clip here, I'd like to say that the important thing to take from all of this is communication is key to any relationship. It doesn't matter if it's your friend, your partner, your parents, other family members, co-workers, anybody that you wish to maintain continual contact with in anything deeper than a surface level way. You have to have good communication. And there are some people who won't offer you the chance to foster good communication, and that happens. It is what it is. Some people aren't open for that or aren't open for it with you. But if you have the opportunity, please try to communicate clearly and well and productively, because it will make everything in your life better. It will make you seem more mature. It will make you feel more mature, and it will make you a more functional person, regardless of your age or status.
To make a long story short, less Angy, more talky.
Perfect. Thank you. That's gonna be the end. Let me turn my monitor back on and I'll end the recording. Less Angy, more talky.
I'm glad I was able to sum that whole story.
I might unironically call this episode Less Angy, More Talky. If you guys liked this video, please remember to leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you thought. I heard some really good comments on the first video as of the time I'm filming this, where people said that they really liked the idea of this series and that they really enjoyed the first video with just me. So let me know what you think about this video featuring Comet. I think that our conversation was really good, and hopefully I've edited this in a way that makes it interesting to watch, the same way that it would be if you were watching just me talk about this. I really want to get some more of my friends on camera here with me and have us talk in a controlled but open way about some of the hardships that we've all faced in our collective lives alongside each other, because we've spent so much time being emotionally close to each other, and I think that it's important to discuss these things in a way that can be chronicled, not only for us to look back on as later adults, but also for you guys to look up to if you're feeling low, or if you're feeling like these things aren't being facilitated well in your own life, or for you to look at if you want, just like an insight into how someone else's life has evolved. So I hope you enjoy this. If you want to see more episodes of The Red Room, let me know, but there are at least a couple more coming, and I'll see you guys soon.